At 1:17 in the morning, Isabella Reyes pressed her back against a cold basement wall, hand clamped over her mouth, listening to footsteps stop directly outside the door. She had three options: scream, run, or call the one man in Chicago everyone else feared. She called him. When he answered, she could barely form the words. "Don't hang up." And Nathan Moretti, the man who had never run toward anything in his life, was already moving. If you love stories about dangerous men and the women who change them, subscribe to our channel, follow this story until the very end, and comment the name of your city below. I want to see how far this story traveled. The basement smelled like old concrete and motor oil. Isabella had counted the footsteps twice, 3 men. Maybe 4, moving in a slow, deliberate circle somewhere above her head, their boots scraping the floor in a pattern that told her they were not lost. They were searching. Her phone screen was the only light she had, and even that terrified her, because light meant she could be found. She pressed it against her chest, muffling the glow, and tried to breathe without making a sound. She had been attending a charity gala on Nathan's behalf. A routine assignment: collect the donation paperwork, shake the right hands, be invisible. That was what Isabella did best. She was invisible. For 3 years inside Nathan Moretti's world, invisibility was her greatest skill. She moved through his offices, his meetings, his carefully organized chaos without drawing attention to herself. She was the woman who made his schedule work, who kept his phones from ringing at the wrong moment, who remembered that his coffee was black with no sugar and that he always read his messages standing up because he hated sitting still. She was his assistant, nothing more, but somewhere between the first floor of the St. Regis Hotel and this basement where she was now hiding, something had gone wrong. She had found the folder by accident. That was the truth she kept replaying in her mind, because she needed it to be true. She had not been looking for anything. She had stepped into the wrong room while looking for the event coordinator, and the laptop sitting open on the desk had been showing a spreadsheet that made no sense. Then she looked closer, and it made terrible, devastating sense. Wire transfers, 11 of them, each one routed through a shell company she recognized because she had processed invoices from that same company 6 months ago. She had flagged the unusual amount to Nathan's financial team at the time. They had told her it was a legitimate consulting fee. She had believed them. She shouldn't have. The numbers on that laptop were not consulting fees. They were payments. Organized, systematic, deliberate payments from someone inside Nathan's inner circle to a rival organization that had been trying to dismantle Moretti's empire for 2 years. Someone was selling him out, and now they knew she had seen it. Isabella's hands were shaking when she pressed call. She had not planned to call Nathan. Her first instinct had been to call the elevator. Get out. Go home. Pretend she had never seen anything. She was his assistant, not his soldier. She had never signed up for this. But the men at the end of the hallway had moved faster than she expected. And there was no elevator anymore. There was only the stairwell, and the stairwell had taken her down instead of up, and now she was underground with 3 men searching the floor above her, and the only person she could think of was Nathan. Not because she trusted him completely, but because she knew what he was capable of. The phone rang once, twice. He answered on the 3rd ring, and his voice was the way it always was, flat, controlled, carrying the particular weight of a man who was never surprised by anything. Isabella, not a question, just her name, the way he always said it, like it was both ordinary and inevitable. "Don't hang up," she whispered. Silence. She counted 3 full seconds of silence, and in those 3 seconds, she heard something she had never heard from Nathan Moretti before. A shift, not a word, not even a sound exactly, just the particular quality of silence that a man produces when something lands in his chest and rearranges everything. "Where are you?" Still not a question, but different now. Harder, sharper, "the basement," she breathed. "Of the hotel. I went down the wrong stairwell, and I can hear them looking." "How many? 3, maybe 4, I don't know, I couldn't see." "Are you hurt?" "No. Not yet." Isabella, his voice dropped. Lower, quieter, which on Nathan Moretti meant something that other men expressed by shouting. "Are you somewhere they can see you right now?" "I'm behind the utility panel." There's a corridor behind the main boiler room. I don't think they know it's here. Good. A pause. She heard movement on his end. The sound of a chair. A door. Stay behind that panel. Do not move. Do not use your phone light. Nathan, I found something. At the gala. A laptop with financial records. They were mine. Not now. But you need to know I said not now. Still quiet. Still controlled. But the edge in it was sharp enough to cut. Tell me when you are safe. Right now I need you to stop talking and stay hidden. Isabella closed her eyes. She pressed her back harder against the wall. And she stayed on the phone without speaking, listening to the sound of Nathan Moretti, moving through what she could only imagine was his office, his building, his world, issuing instructions in a voice too low for her to hear. The words clipped and purposeful, the silence between them filled with the particular intimacy of two people breathing on the same line, while one of them was terrified and the other was already in motion. She had never heard him move like this. She had seen Nathan Moretti in boardrooms and in meetings and in moments of extreme professional pressure, and he had always been still. Controlled, the kind of man who made other men nervous precisely because nothing seemed to touch him. But right now, through the phone, she could feel him moving. Running, almost, and she did not know what to do with that. 40 minutes earlier, Isabella had been fine. She had been standing at the edge of the St. Regis ballroom in the dark blue dress that Nathan's office manager had selected for her, holding a glass of sparkling water she had no intention of drinking, watching the city's most well-dressed people perform their ritual of generosity toward a cancer research foundation she knew most of them had never heard of before the invitation arrived. She was there to collect the pledge forms, represent Moretti Enterprises. Smile. She was good at smiling. It was one of the things she had learned in 3 years of working for Nathan, how to stand in a room full of people who were measuring everything about her, from her shoes to her posture to the particular quality of her stillness, and give them nothing to use against him. Nathan did not attend charity events. He donated to them in amounts that made the organizers nervous about asking for more, and he sent Isabella with detailed instructions about who to speak to, what to say, and how long to stay. She had followed the instructions. She had spoken to the right people. She had stayed the right amount of time. She should have left 30 minutes ago. But the event coordinator, a nervous young man named Daniel, who had been calling Nathan's office for 2 weeks about a discrepancy in the donation paperwork, had finally found her near the exit and asked if she could please just take 5 minutes to look at the documentation he had set up in the conference room on the 2nd floor. 5 minutes. She had said yes because it was easier than saying no, and because she genuinely wanted to resolve the discrepancy so Daniel would stop calling. The conference room was on the 2nd floor. The door next to it, the one she opened by mistake, was not a conference room. It was a private suite, and the laptop on the desk inside that suite had been left open, glowing, unattended, as if whoever had been sitting there had stepped away in a hurry with every intention of returning immediately. Isabella had seen the spreadsheet from 3 feet away. She had recognized the shell company name before she even stepped fully into the room. And she had stood there for what felt like a very long time, staring at numbers that told a story so clear and so devastating that her stomach had dropped through the floor. She had taken a photograph with her phone. She did not know why she did it. It was instinct. The same instinct that made her flag invoices and double-check signatures and save backup copies of everything Nathan signed. She always backed things up. She had backed this up too. And then she had heard footsteps in the hallway. Not Daniel's nervous shuffle. Not the measured stride of hotel staff, heavy, deliberate. The kind of footsteps that belong to men who are looking for something specific. She had moved before she thought about it, slipping out the far door of the suite, finding the stairwell, going down instead of up, because the voices behind her were coming from the elevator bank. And now she was here, underground. On the phone with Nathan Moretti, who had not hung up. 22 minutes after her call, she heard the basement door open. Her breath stopped. A beam of light swept the ceiling of the main boiler room, moving slow and methodical across the pipes and the old machinery, and she pressed herself flat against the back of the utility corridor, phone clutched to her chest, not breathing. Clear, a voice said. Low, clipped, professional. 2 footsteps. A pause, then retreating. The door closed again. Isabella released her breath in a slow, shaking stream. And then Nathan's voice came through the phone, steady and unhurried, as if he had been counting every second too. They just checked your floor. She almost said, "How do you know?" but she didn't, because she already understood. He had eyes in this building now. He had been moving pieces she couldn't see from the moment she called him. Yes, she breathed. They left. My men are at the service entrance on the east side. Ground level. You're going to take the corridor you're in all the way to the end. Turn left at the secondary boiler, and there will be a door marked with a red emergency exit sign. You will push it open and walk out. Do not run. Don't run. Running tells them you're afraid. His voice was completely steady. You're not going to be afraid. You're going to walk like you belong there. My men will be waiting. Isabella stared at the dark corridor in front of her. And if someone sees me before I reach the door, a pause. Very short. Then tell them you're looking for the parking garage and act confused. You're good at giving people exactly what they expect to see. She blinked. It was the most specific compliment Nathan Moretti had ever given her, and it hit her somewhere she hadn't expected. Okay, she said. Isabella, yes, another pause. Longer this time. Walk fast. She made it to the door in 90 seconds. She was not running. She was walking, like she absolutely belonged in the basement of the St. Regis Hotel at 11:15 in the evening, moving with the specific purposeful stride of a woman who had somewhere important to be, and when she hit the emergency exit bar and the cold night air came rushing in, she almost collapsed from the release of it. 2 men were waiting. She didn't recognize either of them, but they were wearing the kind of careful, neutral clothing that Nathan's people always wore when they were trying not to be noticed, and one of them stepped forward immediately and said, very quietly, "Miss Reyes, come with us." She went. The black SUV was running at the curb. She got in, and Nathan Moretti was already inside. She had not expected that. For a full 3 seconds, she sat there in the back seat staring at him in the dark, and he looked at her with an expression she had never seen on his face in 3 years of working beside him. Not relief exactly, because Nathan Moretti did not do relief in any conventional way, but something adjacent to it. Something raw and quickly controlled. Something that disappeared the moment he saw her register it. "You're not hurt," he said. "I told you I wasn't." "I know what you told me." His eyes moved over her face anyway, checking. Fast, thorough, then he looked away. "Give me the phone." "What?" "The photograph you took. Give me the phone." She went very still. "I didn't tell you I took a photograph." Nathan's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. "You flagged a shell company invoice 6 months ago. You were in a room with financial records for 15 seconds before they noticed you. You back up everything." He paused. "You took a photograph." Isabella looked at him for a long moment, then she handed him the phone. He looked at the image for 30 seconds without speaking, and in that 30 seconds, she watched something happen to his face that she had never witnessed before, a kind of slow, deep tightening that was not anger exactly, but something beneath anger. Something older and colder and much more dangerous. "Who was in that room?" he asked. "I don't know. It was empty." Before it was empty, she had been trying not to think about what she had seen on the way to the door. A face, half turned away, speaking to a hotel staff member near the elevator. A face she recognized because she had shaken his hand 2 hours earlier at the gala. A face that belonged to a man Nathan had known for 15 years. "Marcus Hale," she said quietly. Nathan did not move. He did not speak. He sat perfectly still, and the silence in the car was the particular kind of silence that happens when a truth arrives that a person was not ready for, even though some part of them had been moving toward it for a long time. "You're certain," he said. "I saw him clearly." She held his gaze. "I'm sorry, Nathan." Something crossed his face then, just for a fraction of a second. Something she had never seen on Nathan Moretti in all the years she had known him. Something that looked exactly like grief. He covered it immediately. He handed her phone back. He looked out the window. "Don't apologize," he said. "You found it. That means you kept me alive. A pause. Whether you intended to or not, Isabella sat back against the seat. Her hands were still trembling slightly. I absolutely did not intend to, she said. And Nathan, despite everything, despite the betrayal sitting in his chest like a blade, despite the 15 years of trust turned to ash in 30 seconds, made a sound that was almost a laugh. I know, he said. And for the first time since the phone rang at 1:17 in the morning, Isabella believed she was going to be all right. The problem with believing she was going to be all right was that it lasted approximately 11 minutes. That was how long it took for Nathan's phone to ring. He answered it immediately, said 3 words she couldn't hear what, and his entire body changed. Not dramatically, not the way men in movies change when they receive bad news, with sudden movements and raised voices. Nathan's change was the opposite. He became more still. And the more still he became, the more dangerous the air in the car felt. He ended the call. He said nothing for a moment. Then he turned to look at her, and the expression on his face was careful in a way she had never seen from him, careful and deliberate, like a man choosing every word before he released it. Because the words mattered and he was not going to say them wrong. The records you photographed, he said. Marcus was not working alone. She waited. The names in those transfers include people who know your daily schedule. Your route home, the location of your apartment. A pause. They were not trying to get those records back tonight, because you were a random witness. Isabella felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. They know who I am. They have known who you are for months. His voice was very even. Very controlled. You were chosen deliberately, because they know that the fastest way to destroy what I've built is not through my enemies. She understood. She understood it before he finished the sentence, and the understanding settled into her like cold water. It's through you, she said. Not a question. Nathan held her gaze. You are the only person in my organization who has unrestricted access to everything. My schedule, my decisions, my accounts, my vulnerabilities. He stopped. They planned to use you, and when you found the records before they were ready, they moved faster than expected. Isabella stared at him. They were going to use me to get to you, she said slowly. Yes. How long have you known I might be a target? A beat of silence. 1 beat too long, Nathan. Her voice was quiet, but the edge in it was sharp. How long? He looked at her steadily. 3 weeks, he said. The word landed between them, like something physical. 3 weeks. 3 weeks of sitting across from him every morning going over his schedule. 3 weeks of answering his calls and organizing his meetings and reminding him to eat and acting as if everything was completely normal. 3 weeks of him knowing. You knew for 3 weeks, she said, and you didn't tell me. I was gathering information. His voice was steady. I needed to understand the extent of the exposure before I made any moves. I was the exposure, Nathan. I know. I walked into that gala tonight without knowing I might be walking into something dangerous because you decided I didn't need to know. I had 3 men in that building watching you all evening. His voice didn't rise, but it sharpened. The moment your location changed from the 2nd floor to the stairwell, they were already moving. You were never without protection. That is not the same as knowing. No, a pause. It's not. The car was quiet. Isabella looked out her window at the city moving past, all light and distance, and she pressed her lips together and breathed through the anger because the anger was real and deserved, but she was also exhausted. And underneath the anger was something she didn't entirely want to look at yet. He had been watching over her without telling her. For 3 weeks. Not because he didn't trust her, because he didn't want her to be afraid. She turned back to look at him. What happens now? She asked. Nathan's expression settled into something resolved. Now he said, we deal with Marcus Hale. And me? He looked at her for a long moment. The kind of look she had learned to read carefully over 3 years, because Nathan Moretti did not give many of them. He was a man who parceled out directness like currency, rarely deliberately, and only when he had decided the situation required it. You're not going back to your apartment tonight, he said. Or tomorrow night. Or until this is resolved. You're not seriously suggesting. I'm telling you, he said, not asking, not suggesting. My building, my security. until the people who decided to use you as leverage understand that you are no longer available to be leveraged. Isabella looked at him. And if I disagree, Nathan held her gaze. Then I'll disagree with your disagreement, he said, and you'll still end up in my building. She wanted to argue. She genuinely wanted to argue, because she was not the kind of woman who was moved around like a piece on someone else's board, and Nathan Moretti of all people should have known that by now. But she was also sitting in the back of his car at midnight, having spent the last hour hiding in a basement from men who wanted to use her to destroy him. And the anger in her chest, she was slowly realizing, was not entirely about the 3 weeks he had kept her in the dark. Some of it was about the fact that she had been afraid. Really afraid. The kind of afraid she had not allowed herself to feel since she was a girl, when her father's business failed and everything her family had built collapsed overnight, and she had learned early that fear was a luxury she could not afford. She had been afraid tonight, and she had called Nathan. And he had come. She looked out the window again. Fine, she said quietly. Tonight. But we're talking about everything tomorrow. We're talking about everything tonight, Nathan said. After I make 3 phone calls. She turned to look at him. There was nothing gentle about his expression. Nothing soft. He was already thinking about Marcus Hale, already building the response in his mind, the way he built everything methodically, precisely, without a single wasted move. But he had come to that basement. He had been in the car already waiting when she walked out. And the way he had looked at her when she got in that fraction of a second, before he covered it, she was still thinking about that. She was going to keep thinking about it. 3 calls, she said. And then we talk. Nathan gave her one brief, measured nod. The car moved through the city. And somewhere across Chicago, Marcus Hale was about to discover what it felt like when Nathan Moretti stopped treating a threat as a problem to observe and started treating it as a problem to end. The night was not over. It had barely begun. 3 phone calls took Nathan exactly 14 minutes. Isabella knew this because she counted every one of them, sitting across from him in the back seat of that car, watching his face in the dark and learning things about him she had never been permitted to learn in 3 years of working at his side. The first call lasted 4 minutes. His voice was low and precise, and the only words she caught clearly were Hale and tonight and nothing moves until I say so. Whoever was on the other end didn't ask questions. They simply said yes and hung up. The second call lasted 6 minutes and was conducted entirely in a language she didn't speak. Italian, she thought. Though the cadence was strange, regional, older somehow, and Nathan's voice changed register when he spoke it. Less clipped, more layered, like a man slipping into a version of himself that predated everything she knew about him. The third call lasted 4 minutes and was entirely silent on Nathan's end. He listened. He asked one question. He ended the call. Then he put his phone in his jacket pocket and looked at her. Marcus Hale has not left the building, he said. Is that good or bad? It means he doesn't know we have the photograph. Yet, Nathan agreed. The car turned smoothly onto Michigan Avenue, and she watched the lights of the city move past and tried to organize her thoughts into something manageable, but her thoughts were not cooperating. They kept returning to the same point, the spreadsheet, the numbers, the name on those wire transfers, and the way Nathan's face had changed when she said Marcus Hale. 15 years. She knew that number because it had come up exactly once in the 3 years she had worked for him, in a conversation she was not supposed to hear, through a door that was not entirely closed. Nathan and Marcus Hale at the end of a long night, the kind of conversation men have when they think no one is listening, and she had caught only a fragment. 15 years. Nathan, since before any of this, before she had moved quietly away, because some things were not hers to witness. She had never mentioned it. She was regretting that now. Can I ask you something? She said. Nathan's eyes moved to her face. That particular brand of attention he gave, complete and unhurried, the kind of attention most people in his world never received from him, because he was always thinking 3 steps ahead of whatever was happening in front of him. When Nathan Moretti actually looked at you, you felt it. You can ask, he said. How long have you trusted Marcus Hale? A pause. Long enough that I stopped verifying the trust, he said. Which is its own answer. When did you start suspecting him? 4 months ago. A discrepancy in a shipping account. Small. The kind of small that might have been a clerical error or might have been a test. He paused. Marcus knew which accounts I watched closely. Whatever he was doing, he was careful to stay at the edges of my attention. But not careful enough. Not with you in the building, Nathan said. And then something shifted in his expression, not quite what she would call pride, because Nathan didn't wear pride easily, but something in the neighborhood of it. Something that acknowledged her competence, the way he acknowledged everything that mattered to him, which was without ceremony and without decoration. You flagged that invoice 6 months ago. At the time, I assumed my financial team's explanation. I should have listened to what you were actually telling me. Isabella looked at him. I wasn't telling you anything, she said. I thought it was a legitimate consulting fee. You flagged it anyway. He held her gaze. You flag things that don't fit. It's what you do. I should have paid attention to what didn't fit. She didn't know what to say to that. She was, in fact, the woman who flagged things that didn't fit. She had been doing it her entire life at her father's business, where she'd noticed the accounting discrepancies 6 months before the collapse, and at every job since. And here in Nathan's empire, where there were more things that didn't fit than anywhere she'd ever worked, though most of them she had learned to leave alone. She had not flagged those. She had flagged the invoice. And apparently, that had mattered more than she knew. What happens to Marcus? She asked. Nathan's jaw tightened. That depends on what he was planning to do with you. The words landed quietly, but the weight behind them was not quiet at all, and Isabella felt it settle into the car between them, this acknowledgement that whatever Marcus Hale had been building toward included her, specifically her, and that Nathan had been aware of this for 3 weeks and had chosen to manage it without telling her. She was not going to let that go. Not tonight. Not with everything else still raw. Nathan, she said, I know what you're going to say. I don't think you do. He looked at her, waiting. I am not angry that you were protecting me, she said carefully. I am angry that you protected me the way you protect your accounts and your operations, by controlling the information. By deciding what I needed to know and when, without asking me whether I wanted to make that choice for myself. He was quiet. I have worked for you for 3 years, she continued. I have handled things most people in your organization don't even know exist. I have kept your secrets and managed your problems, and covered for the parts of your life that you cannot afford to have visible. And in 3 years, you have never not once treated me like I couldn't handle the truth. I treated you like someone I could not afford to lose, Nathan said. The sentence arrived without warning, and it hit her somewhere she was not entirely prepared for. Because Nathan Moretti did not say things like that. He was a man of precise language and controlled delivery, and in 3 years the closest he had come to acknowledging that she mattered to him personally was the very occasional well done delivered in passing, and the fact that he remembered she hated conference calls and always tried to schedule them when she wasn't in the building. Someone I could not afford to lose. She kept her expression neutral. She was very good at that. That's not a reason to keep me in the dark, she said. No, he agreed. It's an explanation, not a justification. She absorbed that. He was right that it was different. And she respected him enough to acknowledge the difference even now, even with the anger still sitting in her chest. We don't do this again, she said. Define this. You knowing something that puts me in danger and deciding I don't need the information. Nathan held her gaze for a long moment. Agreed, he said. She hadn't expected him to agree that quickly. She had expected pushback. The particular brand of measured, logical resistance that Nathan deployed whenever someone suggested a change to how he operated, thoughtful, almost reasonable, and completely immovable. But he just said agreed, and meant it. She looked away first. Outside, the city had changed the wide commercial avenues, giving way to the quieter, more residential streets of the Gold Coast, and she recognized where they were going before the car turned into the underground garage of Nathan's building. She had been in this building dozens of times. She had never stayed in it. There's a guest suite on the 14th floor, Nathan said. My head of security will bring your things from your apartment before morning. You're sending someone to my apartment at midnight. I'm sending 2 people to your apartment at midnight. One to retrieve your belongings, and one to make sure no one was there before you weren't. Isabella looked at him. That's a very specific concern. It's a very specific situation. He paused. The people Marcus was working with are not amateurs. If they identified you as leverage 3 months ago, they've been watching your routines. Your apartment is the most obvious location. She thought about her apartment. The small, well-organized space she had spent 2 years making exactly the way she wanted it, the bookshelf over the radiator, the coffee maker she had saved for 3 months to afford, the plants on the windowsill she had kept alive through 2 Chicago winters. She thought about strangers having been in it, watching it, cataloging her movements. "Okay," she said, very quietly. Nathan's phone buzzed. He looked at it for 2 seconds. Something shifted in his face. "What?" she said immediately. Marcus Hale just left the building. He stood up, or rather readied to, the car pulling to a stop in the garage, and his voice was entirely different now. Still controlled, but with a current running underneath it, a direction, a momentum. "He's moving toward the River District. That's not where his apartment is." "Where is his apartment?" "Lakeshore." Nathan's eyes were on his phone screen. "The River District is where we process outgoing shipments." Isabella understood immediately. "He's destroying evidence." "He's destroying evidence," Nathan confirmed. He was already out of the car, phone at his ear, moving toward the elevator with the particular fluid certainty of a man who has made a decision and left everything else behind. He paused, turned back to look at her. "Go upstairs. The code is 7419. My man Caruso will be in the lobby. Tell him I said the Hale situation is active." Nathan, "Isabella." He said it the way he had said it on the phone. Quiet, weighted, specific. "Go upstairs." She wanted to argue. She did not argue. She watched him go, and then she turned toward the lobby because Caruso needed to know the Hale situation was active, and because Isabella Reyes did not stand in parking garages waiting to be told what to do next. She had work to do. She simply needed to figure out what exactly it was. Caruso was a large man with a quiet face and the specific stillness of someone who had spent many years being useful in situations where stillness was the most important quality available. He received Nathan's message without changing his expression, asked her 2 brief questions about what she needed, and then produced, from somewhere in the lobby desk, a tablet with full access to the building's internal communication network. "Mr. Moretti said you'd need this," Caruso said. She stared at him. "When did he say that?" 20 minutes ago, when he called ahead. 20 minutes ago they had still been in the car, Nathan on his 3rd phone call, the silent one. The silent call had been to Caruso. He had been arranging this while she was sitting right next to him. She took the tablet. She did not say thank you immediately, because she was too busy processing the information, and Caruso, to his considerable credit, simply nodded and stepped back to give her the space to think. The tablet had access to everything. Not everything in the building, everything in Nathan's empire. Communications logs, financial records, personnel files, the real ones beneath the official ones. She had seen pieces of this system over 3 years, the edges of it, the parts that touched her work directly. She had never had a view of the whole. She was looking at the whole now. And what she saw confirmed everything the photograph had told her, and added dimensions she hadn't anticipated. Marcus Hale had been diverting money for 22 months. Not just to the rival organization she had identified. To 3 separate accounts that fed into a 4th offshore that was in neither Marcus's name nor anyone else's, she recognized. Someone else was behind this. Marcus was a conduit. Her hands were steady on the tablet as she worked through the records, and she was aware somewhere in the back of her mind that she should probably be more frightened than she felt, that a reasonable person in her position would be upstairs in the guest suite with the door locked, waiting for morning. But she was not a reasonable person in any conventional sense. She was Nathan's assistant, and his assistant's job was to find things he didn't know he needed before he knew he needed them. She worked for 40 minutes. She found the 4th account. She found the name behind it, and when her phone rang Nathan's number, she answered on the first ring. "We have a problem," she said. before he could speak. A beat of silence. What did you find? Not a question. She had heard this tone before, the particular flatness that meant he was already in motion and needed information immediately. Marcus wasn't running this, he was being run. She kept her voice even. There's a fourth account. The money from your operation was going through Marcus, through the rival organization, and into a holding account I traced to a shell corporation registered in Delaware 18 months ago. Name, she said it. Another silence, longer, much longer. Nathan, her voice sharpened. You know that name? Yes. His voice had changed, gone somewhere deeper and quieter than she had ever heard it go. I know that name. Who is it? Someone I thought left this city 8 years ago. A pause. Each second of it felt heavier than the last. Someone I made a mistake with a long time ago. A mistake I thought was resolved. Apparently it wasn't. Apparently not. She could hear noise behind him now, movement, voices at a distance, the specific controlled chaos that preceded Nathan making something happen in the physical world as opposed to the financial one. Where are you? She asked. The shipyard. We reached Marcus before he could destroy everything. Her stomach tightened. He's alive. He'll remain alive as long as he continues being useful. A pause. He gave us a location. The person behind the fourth account was supposed to receive a call from Marcus tonight, confirming that you had been handled. The phrase landed coldly. You had been handled. I'm going to assume, Isabella said carefully, that handled doesn't mean what I would prefer it to mean. It doesn't. Nathan's voice was controlled, but the edge beneath it was sharp enough to draw blood. They intended to use you to access my private communications before the end of this week. When that was complete, you would have become a liability. She absorbed this. She had known it intellectually since the car, since Nathan had explained what she represented to the people moving against him. But hearing it stated with this precision, the timeline, the plan, the specific word liability, made it something more than intellectual. She had been 3 days from something she did not want to name. What happens now, she said. Her voice was completely steady. She was proud of that. Now Marcus makes a phone call, confirming that you have been handled. And the person on the other end goes to the location they plan to use, believing everything is proceeding. And when they arrive at that location, my people will be waiting, Nathan said. And what about me? The briefest pause. What about you, he asked. If Marcus makes a call saying I've been handled, the person on the other end is going to expect confirmation. Evidence. Something specific. Marcus knows enough about me to make it believable, but if this person has been planning this for months, they'll be careful. Nathan was quiet. She could hear him thinking. What are you suggesting? He said. I'm suggesting, Isabella said, that if you want this to work cleanly, you need whoever is on the other end of that call to believe they've won. And the most convincing way to make someone believe they've won is to give them something they can verify. That is not something I'm willing to do, Nathan said. Immediately. No hesitation. I'm not suggesting you put me in danger. I'm suggesting we use the photograph. She paused. I have the original on my phone. If Marcus tells them I was handled before I could pass the photograph to anyone, they'll want proof that the photograph is gone. We give them proof, a doctored version. Something that confirms I had the information, and it was contained. Silence on the line. Long enough that she thought he might simply refuse. That could work, Nathan said finally. His voice had changed again back to operational, precise, the man who built things and dismantled them with equal competence. The photograph, confirmed destroyed, with Marcus's account of how it was recovered. It gives them a clean exit and brings them to the location without suspicion. Yes, I don't like it. It's the right move. Another pause. I know it's the right move, Nathan said. I said I don't like it. And in the middle of everything, the fear that had finally started to settle, the exhaustion she was only beginning to feel, the enormity of what she had stumbled into in a hotel conference room, Isabella almost smiled. Because there was Nathan, under all of it, the man who knew the right move and still didn't like it, who would do it anyway because competence mattered more to him than comfort, who was standing at a shipyard at midnight, managing a 15-year betrayal and still finding the space to say something honest. "I'll send you the modified file," she said. "Caruso can help you." "I don't need help." A brief silence that felt almost warm. "No," Nathan said. "You generally don't." He ended the call. She went back to the tablet. Caruso appeared at her elbow 30 seconds later with a coffee she hadn't asked for, set it beside her without comment, and returned to his position. She worked, and somewhere across the city, Marcus Hale was preparing to make a phone call. And the person who had spent 22 months trying to dismantle Nathan Moretti's empire from the inside was about to discover that the woman they had dismissed as leverage had been the most dangerous variable in their plan all along. Not because Isabella was ruthless, not because she was powerful, but because she was competent, and because 3 years of working inside Nathan Moretti's world had taught her the most important thing his enemies always forgot. The most dangerous person in any room is the one nobody looks at twice. The modified file took her 23 minutes to construct. It was good work, clean, precise, the kind of thing that would survive a cursory verification from someone who was expecting to be reassured rather than suspicious. She had built it from the original photograph, altered the timestamp and 2 of the key transfer numbers in ways that rendered the evidence useless without making the alteration visually obvious. She sent it to Nathan. He sent back 2 words. "Perfect." "Stay." She looked at the word "stay" for a moment. Coming from anyone else, she would have bristled at it. Coming from Nathan, in this context, it meant something more specific and less condescending than it appeared on the surface. It meant, "You have done what needed doing, and now let the rest of it be mine." It meant, "I will handle what comes next." It meant, underneath everything, something she was only just beginning to understand how to hear. It meant he was thinking about her, not just about the problem. About her. She set the tablet down. She picked up the coffee Caruso had brought. She thought about Marcus Hale, who had known Nathan for 15 years, and had spent 22 months deciding that wasn't enough. She thought about the 4th account, the name behind it, the person who had apparently left Chicago 8 years ago, and come back carrying something old and unresolved. She thought about the moment in the car when Nathan had said, "I made a mistake with a long time ago," in the voice of a man who had spent 8 years believing the mistake was behind him. She thought about what it meant to build a life around protection and control and the careful management of every variable, and then to discover that the variable you forgot to manage was grief. Old grief. The kind that doesn't announce itself. Nathan had told her only once in 3 years, that he had built his empire because he had watched his father lose everything to people who had no rules. He had been 17. He had learned the lesson with the specific thoroughness of a 17-year-old who loves his father and cannot understand how the world could be that brutal and that simple simultaneously. He had built rules, his own rules. And inside those rules he had built something that worked, that held, that endured through betrayal and the constant attrition of a world that wanted what he had. He had survived all of it, and now the thing that had almost undone him was not an enemy. It was someone he had trusted, and 8 years ago, wounded in some way she didn't yet understand. Isabella sat with that thought. She was still sitting with it 40 minutes later when her phone buzzed. "Nathan," not a call, a message. "It's done. The location was confirmed. Everyone is accounted for. Come down to the car." She stood. She looked at the tablet, at the records she had spent the last hour inside, at the shape of the thing she had accidentally uncovered and accidentally helped resolve. She thought about her apartment and the plants on the windowsill and the life she had been living on the edges of Nathan's world, careful and capable and almost invisible. Almost. She walked toward the elevator, and when the doors opened at the lobby level and she stepped out and saw Nathan standing there, not in the car, not at a distance, but there, in the lobby, waiting, she stopped. He looked tired, not the kind of tired she had seen on him before, the long meeting tired, the difficult negotiation tired. This was something older, the specific exhaustion of a man who has been carrying something heavy for a long time and has just set it down and is not entirely sure what to do with his hands now. He looked at her for a long moment. "You did good work tonight," he said. Not "well done" in passing, not a brief nod of acknowledgement. He looked at her and said it directly, and it landed differently than she expected. You too, she said. He nodded once. Then, because he was Nathan and even exhausted, he was not a man who left things at the surface. He said, "The name behind the fourth account. I'll explain it to you tomorrow. The full story. You've earned it." She looked at him. "You don't have to. I know I don't have to." He held her gaze. "I want to." The lobby was quiet around them. The city outside was dark. And Isabella Reyes, who had spent 3 years moving carefully through the edges of this man's life without leaving marks, felt something shift in the careful distance she had maintained between what she observed and what she allowed herself to feel. She didn't say anything, but she didn't look away either. And Nathan, who noticed everything, noticed that too. "14th floor," he said. 7419. "I remember." He nodded. She walked toward the elevator. She was almost there when he said her name. She turned. He was still standing where she'd left him, watching her with the particular expression she had seen in the car, the one that lasted a fraction of a second, before he controlled it, and this time he didn't control it. This time he let it stay. "I'm glad you called me," he said. 3 words that were really something much larger. Something she understood the full weight of. "I knew you'd come," she said. The elevator doors opened. She stepped inside, and as the doors closed, she was aware that whatever careful distance she had been maintaining, the professional distance, the sensible distance, the distance that kept things simple and uncomplicated and safe, had just become significantly harder to maintain. She pressed 14. The elevator rose. Somewhere below, Nathan Moretti stood in his own lobby and thought about a woman who had spent 3 years keeping him human without ever letting herself know that was what she was doing. And the real danger, the kind that couldn't be resolved with information or tactics, or the precise application of power, was only just beginning. She did not sleep. Isabella had known she wouldn't. Had known it the moment the elevator doors closed, and she was alone with the silence of the 14th floor and the particular quality of stillness that comes after an evening where someone has decided you are expendable. She lay on top of the covers in the guest suite, fully dressed, shoes still on, phone on the pillow beside her, and stared at the ceiling and let her mind do what it needed to do. It went back to the spreadsheet. 22 months of transfers. 11 accounts. A 4th holding pool feeding into a name Nathan had said, with the voice of a man touching an old wound he thought had closed. "Someone I made a mistake with a long time ago." She turned that phrase over in her mind the way she turned over invoice discrepancies methodically, from every angle, looking for what didn't fit. Nathan was not a man who made mistakes easily. He was too careful, too controlled, too thoroughly constructed around the principle that preparation prevented error. When he said mistake, he did not mean miscalculation. He meant something human, something that had cost him in a way that numbers couldn't measure. She wanted to know what it was. She recognized, somewhere underneath the professionalism and the exhaustion, that she wanted to know because she cared. Not as his assistant, not as the woman who managed his schedule and flagged his invoices and reminded him to eat. As something she had been carefully not naming for a period of time she was no longer entirely certain how to calculate. Her phone buzzed at 4:47 in the morning. Not Nathan. His head of security, a sharp-faced woman named Delgado who communicated exclusively in sentences of 5 words or fewer. Apartment was accessed. 3 weeks ago. Nothing taken. Isabella read it twice. 3 weeks ago. The same window in which Nathan had known she might be a target. Someone had been inside her apartment, not to take anything, not to damage anything, but simply to be there, to confirm the layout, to understand her routines from the inside. She sat up. She typed back devices. The response came in 40 seconds. 1. Under the kitchen table. Already removed. She put the phone down on the bed beside her and sat with that for a moment. Someone had put a listening device under her kitchen table. She ate breakfast at that table every morning. She made phone calls at that table. She had sat at that table 6 days ago, going through Nathan's weekly schedule on her laptop, reading appointment times aloud to herself the way she always did when she was organizing her notes. They had heard everything. The anger came back, sharper than it had been in the car, sharper than the version she had directed at Nathan for keeping her in the dark. This was a different kind, cleaner, colder, the kind that didn't want to be expressed. It wanted to be useful. She picked the phone back up. She called Nathan. He answered on the first ring, which meant he hadn't slept either. "You already know," she said. "Delgado reports to me first," he said. "I told her to contact you at the same time, tonight." "Why?" "Because you said we don't do that again, the keeping you in the dark." A pause. Brief. Deliberate. "I'm trying." She closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. "They heard everything I said for 3 weeks," she said. "Yes, that includes every scheduling call, every appointment confirmation, every conversation I had in my own kitchen while I was just trying to get through a Tuesday. Yes, Nathan." Her voice dropped. "They would have heard me talking to my sister. She calls every Sunday morning. I always take it at the kitchen table." A pause on his end that told her he understood exactly what that meant, not just the security implications, but the personal violation of it. Her sister lived in Phoenix and called every Sunday and knew nothing about the actual shape of Isabella's work, only that she had a good job with a demanding employer, and their Sunday calls were the one part of Isabella's week that had nothing to do with Nathan Moretti's empire. Until apparently they did. "Your sister is not in any danger," Nathan said carefully. "The people involved were focused on operational intelligence. Your personal calls would not have been prioritized." "You can't actually promise that." "No," he admitted. "I can't." She appreciated the honesty enough that the anger dialed back by a fraction. "Only a fraction. Tell me about the name behind the fourth account," she said. "You said tomorrow. It's tomorrow." Another pause. Longer. She had the impression of a man deciding how far to open a door. "His name is Victor Crane," Nathan said. 8 years ago, he was my partner." She had not expected that. Partner as an equal share of everything I had built up to that point. "We started together. I was 24, he was 27. He had the connections, I had the operational intelligence. For 4 years it worked." "What happened?" "His daughter," Nathan said. Quietly, without decoration, she was caught in something that had nothing to do with her. A message sent to Victor from a rival organization. They used her to send it. Isabella was very still. She survived. She was 8 years old and she survived, and Victor was never the same person after. A pause. "He blamed me. Partially. Not without reason. The rival organization was targeting me, and Victor's family was in the crossfire because of his association with me. He took his share of the assets and he left. I let him go because anything else would have been—"
Nathan stopped.
"Wrong. It would have been wrong. And now he's back. Now he's back. With 22 months of preparation and Marcus Hale's 15-year relationship with me as a door. His voice was even, but the flatness in it was not the professional flatness she knew. It was the flatness of a man speaking around something that hurt. Victor had a grievance. A real one. I understood it 8 years ago. I still understand it. That doesn't make what he did to you acceptable." She absorbed this, the full shape of it. A man who had been genuinely wronged, who had carried that wrong for 8 years, who had come back not simply for money or power, but for something more complicated and more human than either of those things. And who had, in the course of pursuing that complicated human grief, decided that Isabella Reyes was a useful instrument. That last part was the part she could not forgive. "Where is Victor Crane now?" she asked. "In custody," Nathan said. "As of 2 hours ago. And what happens to him?" The pause this time had a different quality. Not reluctance. Something more like wait. "That's what I've been sitting here deciding," Nathan said. She thought about the little girl who was 8 years old and survived. Who was now 16, probably, living somewhere with a father who had spent 8 years feeding a wound until it consumed him. She thought about what Nathan had said, "I let him go because anything else would have been wrong," and she thought about what it cost a man like Nathan to say that. To do that. To let someone walk away from him with half of everything he'd built because the alternative was wrong. Most people in Nathan's world did not have that word in their vocabulary. Wrong. He did. He had always had it. That was the thing she had known for 3 years and had been very careful not to think about too directly. "I need to see the information I pulled last night," she said. "There's something in the transfer records I want to check." "Isabella, I'm not sleeping," she said, "and I'm not going to sleep." so I might as well be useful. Caruso still has the tablet. A very brief silence that sounded almost like reluctant amusement. Caruso has the tablet, Nathan said. She was already moving toward the door. The lobby at 5 in the morning had the particular quality of a place that never fully stopped Caruso at his desk. Two other men she didn't know, stationed near the entrance. The building breathing around them with the low hum of an operation that ran without pause. She took the tablet and the fresh coffee that appeared before she asked for it and went to the sitting area near the window and opened the transfer records. She was looking for something specific. It took her 11 minutes to find it. The fourth account, Victor Crane's holding account, had received its last transfer not from Marcus Hale's routing, but from a separate source entirely. A different shell company, different registration date, different routing chain. Newer, established only 4 months ago. Someone else had been feeding money into Victor Crane's operation. Someone who had not been part of the original plan. Someone who had found out about Victor's return and decided to accelerate it. Her fingers moved faster across the screen. She pulled the registration data on the new shell company, ran it against the other corporate names in the file, and found the connection in the third layer of subsidiaries. The new money came from a company that was registered to a board of 3 directors. She recognized one of the names immediately. Her stomach dropped. She picked up her phone and called Nathan. He answered before it finished the first ring. "There's a second investor," she said. "Someone who found out about Victor Crane's plan and started funding it 4 months ago. Someone who isn't connected to Victor or Marcus." She heard Nathan go completely still on the other end of the line. The kind of stillness that preceded something significant. "Name," he said. She said it. 3 seconds of silence. "Then are you certain?" I pulled the subsidiaries chain 3 levels deep. "It's clean. There's no ambiguity." That's Nathan stopped. That's someone who should not have known Victor Crane existed. "I know, the only way they could have known
is if someone told them," she finished.
"Someone inside your organization who knew about Victor's return before you did." Another silence, longer than any of the previous ones. She could hear something happening on his end of the line. Not movement, something interior, the particular sound of a person rearranging a very large number of things very quickly. "How long ago did the funding start?" he asked. 4 months ago. First transfer on the 14th. 4 months ago, I started suspecting Marcus." She understood immediately. The person who funded Victor found out you were getting close. They used Victor to accelerate the timeline before you could identify the leak.
Yes.
Which means Victor wasn't just pursuing a grievance. He was being used too. Yes. Nathan. She kept her voice steady, but she felt the weight of what she was about to say before she said it. "The person who funded this knew your schedule. They knew about Marcus before you confirmed him. They knew about me." A pause. "The listening device in my apartment. It was placed 3 weeks ago, right when you started narrowing your investigation." "Someone was watching my investigation," Nathan said. Quietly, someone who had access to your movements at a level that Marcus couldn't have provided. A silence so dense she could feel it pressing through the phone. "There's a third person," Nathan said. "Yes. And they've been inside my operation long enough to know everything." "Yes." She heard him exhale, not dramatically, not with the weight of a man overwhelmed, but with the controlled, deliberate release of someone who is pushing something back down because there is no time for it right now. "Send me the document trail," he said. "Everything you've found. Don't filter it. Already sending." She had begun the transfer before she called him. He was quiet for a moment, and she could hear the ping on his end as the files arrived. "Isabella," he said. "Yes." "How are you doing this?" he asked. "Not operationally. Not strategically. Just asking. Like a person." She looked at the tablet screen and the transfer records and the shape of the conspiracy she had been dismantling, piece by piece, for the past several hours. And she thought about what an honest answer to that question would look like. "I'm angry," she said. "Angry is useful." A pause. "Yes," Nathan said. "It is. And I keep thinking," she continued, "about the little girl. Victor's daughter. She was 8 years old. And someone used her as a message. And then Victor spent 8 years turning that into something that ended up with people in my apartment and someone trying to use me the same way. She paused. I'm angry about that, most of all. That the same logic using someone who doesn't deserve it as an instrument keeps replicating itself. Nathan was quiet for a long time. I think about her too, he said finally. Amelia, Victor's daughter. I thought about her when I let Victor go, and I've thought about her every time someone in my organization makes a decision that puts an innocent person at risk. A pause. I'm not a good man, Isabella. I know what I am and what I've built. But I've tried to keep that line between the people who chose this world and the people who didn't. She thought about the things she had seen over 3 years. The medical bills paid quietly, the families protected, the particular way Nathan drew borders around people who had not asked to be inside his world. She had always seen it. She had always been careful not to say she'd seen it. I know, she said. Victor stopped seeing that line 8 years ago, Nathan said. And the person funding him, the third person, never saw it at all. We need to find them before they know Victor's operation has been dismantled, she said. Yes. They'll realize it within hours. The moment Marcus misses his check-in call, whoever is watching the operation will know something went wrong. She looked at the time on the tablet. 5:44 in the morning. When was Marcus supposed to check in? 6 o'clock, Nathan said. She did the math. 16 minutes. Nathan, I know. He was already moving. She could hear it. I'm going to let him make the call. You're going to let Marcus make the check-in call? With one modification. I'm going to be listening to every word. And so are you. She straightened. You want me on that call? Not on it. Monitoring it. I'm sending you a number. Call it in the next 2 minutes. You'll be patched into the audio feed from Marcus's phone before the call connects. If the third person says anything that references information you've found in those records, anything that tells us how deep their access goes, I need you to flag it immediately. How do I flag it? Text me the word yes the moment you hear it. That's it? Just yes? I'll know what it means. She looked at the phone in her hand. Okay, she said. Isabella. His voice shifted, dropped half a register, into something she had no professional category for. This morning after this call, I need you to stop working. Nath, not forever. A few hours. You've been awake all night and you've dismantled a 22-month conspiracy before sunrise. There's a point past which the mind starts making errors. A pause. Even yours. She started to say that she was fine. She stopped. Because she wasn't entirely fine, and they had agreed on honesty, and also because Nathan saying even yours in that particular quiet way was the kind of thing that landed in the chest and made arguing feel beside the point. A few hours, she said. A few hours. The number he had promised appeared in a text the moment they hung up. She dialed it immediately, heard 2 clicks, and then the soft open quality of a monitored line, and pressed the phone to her ear. At exactly 6 o'clock, Marcus Hale made his check-in call. The phone rang 3 times on the other end. Someone answered. Not a voice she recognized. Low, measured, careful, the voice of a person who was accustomed to being on the other end of calls like this, who had been doing it for a long time, who was very good at giving away nothing. Report, the voice said. Marcus, reading from whatever Nathan's team had prepared for him, delivered the check-in smoothly. The timeline. The confirmation that the photograph was contained. A brief account of how the situation with Isabella had been resolved. The person on the other end listened without interrupting. Then they said, and the assistant herself, handled, Marcus said. The word still landed coldly, even knowing it was scripted. No further risk. A pause. What about the tablet? The voice said. Isabella's hand tightened on the phone. Marcus paused. A half-second too long. She texted Nathan the word yes before Marcus had finished stumbling through the improvised answer. The tablet. They knew about the tablet. The tablet Caruso had produced from the lobby desk at Nathan's instruction, the one with access to the full record system, the one she had spent the last 6 hours working from. The third person knew about the tablet, which meant they knew Nathan had authorized her to access the full system. Which meant they had been inside Nathan's building. Nathan's phone was already buzzing in her ear before she finished the thought, not a call, a message. I heard it. Don't move. She didn't move. She sat in the lobby with the phone pressed to her ear as Marcus finished the call, as the line disconnected, and she thought about what don't move meant in Nathan's vocabulary. It meant the third person was close. It meant Nathan knew where they were. It meant something was about to happen, and he needed her exactly where he could account for her. Caruso appeared at her elbow. "Reyes," he said, in his quiet, unhurried way. "Mr. Moretti asked me to stay with you." She looked at him. "How close is close?" she asked. Caruso's expression did not change. "Very," he said. She put the phone down on her knee. She breathed, and she waited. For the first time in the entire night, she was not working, not analyzing, not finding the next thing. She was simply sitting in a lobby at 6 in the morning, letting Nathan do what Nathan did. And the difficulty of that, the genuine difficulty of trusting someone enough to stop, to wait, to let them carry the part that was theirs, was greater than she had anticipated. She was not good at waiting. She was not good at trusting. She was very good at doing. And the fact that Nathan had asked her to stop, had asked it in that specific quiet way, had said even yours had seen her, specifically her, and asked her to trust him with the rest of it, was doing something to the careful structure she had maintained for 3 years. The structure that kept her competent and available and useful, and not, under any circumstances, involved. She had been involved for hours. She suspected she had been involved for considerably longer than that, and had simply been too sensible to admit it. Her phone buzzed. "Nathan, building is secure. Third person is in custody. Come up to the conference room." She read it twice. Then she looked at Caruso. "The building is secure," she said. "Yes, ma'am," Caruso said, as if he had known for 5 minutes. "You knew. Mr. Moretti likes to confirm before he tells you," Caruso said, with the specific neutrality of a man who has worked for Nathan Moretti long enough to understand exactly how he operates and has made a private peace with all of it. She stood. She picked up the tablet and the cold coffee, and she went to the elevator. She pressed the button for the floor, where Nathan's conference room was, and she thought about what third person in custody meant, and who the third person was, and what Nathan's expression was going to look like when she walked in the door. She had spent all night reading financial records and finding things. She was about to find out whether the thing she found at 6 o'clock in the morning was going to be the most significant thing she found, or just the door to something larger. The elevator rose. The doors opened. Nathan was standing in the hallway outside the conference room, not inside it, waiting for her, and the moment she saw his face, she knew that whatever she was about to hear was not going to be simple. "The third person," she said. "Yes," he said. "Who is it?" Nathan looked at her steadily. "Someone who has been in my organization for 9 months," he said. "Someone I brought in personally. Someone I vouched for, internally, because I believed the reference I was given." He paused. The reference came from Marcus Hale. She absorbed this. "Marcus didn't just betray you," she said slowly. "He seeded your organization with Victor Crane's contact before you even knew Victor was back. 9 months ago, before the financial transfers began. Before any of the activity I was monitoring for." Nathan's voice was controlled. But underneath it was something she had not heard from him before, not grief exactly, but its close cousin. The specific disorientation of a man who has discovered that the ground he was standing on was preparing for collapse long before he noticed the tremors. "I brought this person in. I gave them access. To the tablet system. To the scheduling records," he stopped. "To information about you." The last sentence landed separately from the others. She heard the weight in it. "It's not your fault," she said. "I vouched for them, based on a reference that was deliberately falsified to exploit your trust in Marcus." She held his gaze. "That's not a mistake in your judgment. That's someone who understood exactly how your judgment worked and engineered around it. That's different." He looked at her. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, very quietly, "You're doing the thing you do." "What thing?" "The thing where you reframe the situation until the person in front of you can see it from the angle that's actually accurate instead of the angle that's most self-punishing." A pause. "You do it better than anyone I've ever met." She felt heat in her face that she was grateful the lobby lighting was too low to make obvious. "Someone has to," she said. And Nathan, despite everything, the all-night crisis, the 22 months of betrayal unwound in 6 hours. The third person, now in custody down the hall, looked at her with an expression that had nothing to do with crisis management or operational efficiency or the particular requirements of a dangerous world. He looked at her like a man who was finally seeing something he had been deliberately not looking at for a long time, and had decided, at 6:15 in the morning, at the end of the worst night of the last 3 years, that not looking at it was no longer something he was willing to do. "Isabella," he said. She waited. "I need you to understand something before we go into that room and deal with what's left of this." "Okay. When you called me last night," he said, "when you said don't hang up, the reason I was already moving before you finished the sentence was not because you are my employee. It was not because you are valuable to my organization. It was not because losing you would create a logistical problem." He paused, each word placed carefully. "I was moving because it was you. Because the thought of something happening to you is the one contingency I have never been willing to sit with." The hallway was very quiet. She looked at him. "Nathan, I'm not asking you to do anything with that," he said. "I'm not asking you to feel something you don't feel. I'm telling you because we agreed on honesty, and I've been dishonest about this one thing for longer than I should have been." She was quiet for a moment. A long moment. "I called you," she said finally, "at 1:17 in the morning, when I had 3 other options and I was more afraid than I've been in 15 years. I called you." He was very still. "I called you," she said again. "Not because you have resources, not because you could solve the problem. I called you because when everything went wrong, you were the person I wanted on the other end of the line." She held his gaze. "You should probably do something with that." He looked at her for 3 full seconds. Then the corner of his mouth moved barely, just barely. The specific, almost expression that she had learned over 3 years was as close as Nathan Moretti came to letting himself be undone by something good. "Later," he said. "When this is finished." "Later," she agreed. He opened the conference room door. She walked in ahead of him. And whatever waited in that room, the third person, the remaining pieces of a 22-month conspiracy, the questions that still needed answers, she walked toward it, with the particular kind of steadiness that comes not from the absence of fear, but from knowing, with absolute certainty, who is standing behind you. The third person was a woman named Claire Soto. Isabella had not expected that. She absorbed it in the doorway of the conference room, the fact of the woman sitting at the long table, hands folded in front of her, expression composed in the specific way of someone who has decided that composure is the only weapon they have left. Claire Soto was 31 years old. She had been working in Nathan's financial compliance division for 9 months. She had a desk 12 feet from Isabella's office. They had exchanged good mornings approximately 200 times. Isabella had liked her. That was the part that landed hardest. She had liked Claire Soto in the uncomplicated way you like a colleague who is competent and pleasant and seems to genuinely care about doing good work. She had recommended her for a cross-to-Berkentelbart project 3 months ago. She had put her name in front of Nathan as someone worth watching. She stood in the doorway and absorbed all of this and kept her face exactly neutral. Nathan came in behind her and closed the door. Claire looked up. For a moment, the 3 of them existed in a triangle of silence, Claire at the table, Isabella near the door, Nathan between them. And the silence was the kind that forms when everyone in the room knows exactly what is happening and no one has decided yet how to begin. Nathan pulled out the chair across from Claire and sat down. He did not look at the 2 men stationed near the wall. He did not look at Isabella. He looked at Claire with the particular quality of attention he gave to things that mattered, the complete and unhurried focus, and he said simply, "Tell me why." Claire looked at him. "You already know why," she said. Her voice was steady, almost impressive. "The record." "I know the financial structure," Nathan said. "I know the timeline. I know Marcus introduced you, and I know the 4 months of transfers, and I know Victor Crane's name." He paused. "I'm asking why you specifically. Why you agreed to do this." Claire's composure held for exactly 3 more seconds. Then something cracked behind her eyes, not dramatically, not with tears, or with the visible collapse of someone whose defenses fail completely. Just a small fracture. A hairline thing. Because Victor Crane offered me something you never would have, she said. Which was a way out. She looked at him steadily. I'm good at what I do. I've been good at it for 9 months. I've watched the organization work. I've seen how the money moves and where it goes and what it builds. I've also seen what happens to the people at my level when they stop being useful. She paused. Victor offered me a percentage. Real money, enough money to go somewhere that isn't Chicago and do something that isn't this. You could have resigned, Nathan said. People don't just resign from Moretti Enterprises, she said. Not people who know what I know. The room was quiet. Nathan leaned back slightly. He looked at her for a long moment without speaking, and Isabella, watching from the door, recognized the specific quality of that silence. He was not deciding whether she was telling the truth. He had already determined she was telling the truth. He was deciding what the truth meant and what it required from him. You're not wrong, he said, not agreeing with her choice. Acknowledging the reality of her concern. Claire blinked. She had not expected that. I'm not going to pretend the position you were in was simple, Nathan continued. Marcus brought you into something you didn't fully understand the shape of before you were inside it. Victor offered you something that looked like escape. You made a choice that put someone else in danger. He paused. That last part is the part I can't move past. Claire's gaze shifted briefly to Isabella. Something moved across her face. Not quite guilt. Something more complicated. The look of a person confronting a consequence they had successfully avoided thinking about by keeping it abstract. She had put Isabella in danger. She had heard 200 good mornings and recommended for the project, and she had put her name into the machinery anyway, and sitting across from the reality of that, not an abstraction, not a logistical risk, but a specific person who had liked her genuinely and who had spent last night hiding in a hotel basement was clearly different from anything Claire had prepared herself for. I didn't know they were going to put a device in her apartment, Claire said. Quietly. But you gave them her schedule, Nathan said. Not as an accusation, as a fact. Yes, and you knew what they intended to do with her. A longer pause. I knew she was a target, Claire said. I told myself it would stay. She stopped. She started again. I told myself a lot of things. The room absorbed this. Nathan looked at the table for a moment. Just a moment. Here's what happens now, he said. You're going to give my team everything. Every communication with Victor, every instruction from Marcus, every detail of what you passed on and when. If you do that completely and without omission, you leave this building and this city and this life with the understanding that if I ever hear your name again, the next conversation will be different. Claire stared at him. That's it? She said. That's it. You're not. She stopped. Recalibrated. I expected something worse. I know you did. Nathan's voice was even. The fact that you expected something worse should tell you something about the version of me that operates when someone I care about is not in the room. The implication settled over the table like a change in pressure. Claire looked at Isabella. Isabella held her gaze without expression. I'm sorry, Claire said, and it was not a performed apology, not the kind calibrated for an audience. It was quiet and direct, and landed the way honest things land, without cushioning, without grace. Isabella said nothing. Not because she couldn't, because she was choosing. She was choosing to let Nathan handle this part, because it was his to handle, and because she had learned in the last 6 hours that trust was not a passive thing. It required active decisions, letting go of the parts that were not yours. That was harder than anything she had done with the tablet. Nathan stood. He looked at his 2 men. Take her to Delgado, he said. Full debrief. Nothing missed. They moved. Claire moved with them. At the door she paused for 1 second, looked back at Nathan, and said, for what it's worth. Victor Crane isn't a bad man. He's a man who ran out of good options a long time ago and never found his way back. Nathan looked at her steadily. I know what Victor is, he said. That's why this is complicated. The door closed. Isabella and Nathan were alone in the conference room. The silence was different from any silence they had shared in 3 years of working together, because it was not a professional silence, and they both knew it, and neither of them immediately filled it. "You were kind to her," Isabella said finally. "I was practical," Nathan said. "You were kind and practical," she said. "Don't undercut yourself." He looked at her across the table. "The version of this that happened 10 years ago would have been different," he said. "I want you to know that, not to make you comfortable with who I was. So you understand who I'm describing when I say I've tried to become something else." She walked to the table and sat down in the chair Claire had vacated because her legs were tired, and it was nearly 7 in the morning, and she had been awake for a very long time. And she looked at Nathan across the table and said, "Tell me about Victor." "Isabella, you said you'd tell me everything. The full story." She held his gaze. "I want it now, before we deal with whatever comes next." Nathan looked at her for a moment. Then he sat back down. And he told her about being 24 years old and meeting Victor Crane at a moment when Nathan had ambition and no structure, and Victor had connections and no discipline, and how the combination of those two things had built something neither of them could have built alone. He told her about the 4 years when it genuinely worked. The way things work when two people complement each other's edges, and about the night 8 years ago when Victor's daughter, Amelia, was taken from her school and held for 6 hours by people who wanted Nathan to understand what they could reach. He described the moment Victor walked into his office the day after Amelia came home. He described the expression on Victor's face, not rage, because rage was something Nathan could have met on his own ground. Something beyond rage, something that had caved in, that had lost its structure. The face of a man who had discovered that the world he had agreed to inhabit could reach his daughter, and that he had not protected her, and that this was something he would carry forever. He described telling Victor to take his share and go. He described the silence with which Victor had left. "I thought it was over," Nathan said. 8 years of nothing. No contact, no threat. I thought he had found a way to put it down. He hadn't, Isabella said. He hadn't. He'd found a way to point it somewhere. Nathan paused. "At me," she thought about that. The particular trajectory of a grief that has nowhere to go, and finally finds a direction even if the direction is wrong, even if it costs more than it recovers. She had seen that kind of grief before, in smaller forms, in ordinary lives. It was not less destructive for being smaller. "What happens to him now?" she asked. "He's in a facility on the west side. My people have him." Nathan looked at the table. "I've been sitting here since 3 in the morning, trying to decide whether to hurt him, whether to let the old version of me make the call." He looked up. The version that would have seen this as a betrayal requiring a response. The version that built everything on the principle that people who move against you are neutralized completely. "And what does the current version see?" He was quiet. "A man who was injured by something I was part of," he said. "Who handled that injury in a way that put people I care about in danger. Who used a 22-year-old woman's fear as a tool and a grieving father's anger as a mechanism. Who deserves consequences." He paused. "And who is also, fundamentally, someone I wronged." Isabella looked at him. "Both things can be true," she said. "I know." His voice was tight. "That's what makes it complicated." She thought for a moment. Then she said, "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "When Victor's daughter was taken, the rival organization that did it, what happened to them?" A pause. "They're not operational anymore," Nathan said. "Because of you. Because of me. Did Victor know that?" A longer pause. "I handled it quietly," Nathan said. "I didn't tell him." Isabella looked at him steadily. "You dismantled the organization that hurt his daughter and never told him." "I didn't want credit," Nathan said. "I wanted it done." She sat with that. She sat with the full shape of it, the man who had spent 8 years being blamed for something he had spent equivalent energy trying to make right, silently, without acknowledgement, without the comfort of Victor knowing and modifying his grief accordingly. "Nathan," she said, "I know what you're going to say." "Tell him," she said. "Whatever you decide to do with Victor Crane, tell him first." That you handled the organization, that you've known about Amelia every year, that you let him go because it was wrong not to. She paused. He built 8 years of a specific narrative inside his own head. He deserves to know if part of that narrative was wrong. Nathan was very still. He might not believe me, he said. He might not, she agreed. But you'll have told him. And that matters regardless of whether he believes it. Nathan looked at her across the table. That expression was back, the one from the car, the one from the lobby, the one he had been allowing to stay for increasing lengths of time since 6 in the morning. Not the fraction of a second. Something longer now. Something that had decided it was not going anywhere. You do this constantly, he said. Do what? Find the angle that requires the most courage and call it the obvious one. It is the obvious one, she said. For you, he said. For most people, it's the hardest one. She looked down at the table. I spent a lot of years in situations where the easy choice was also the wrong one, she said. When my father's business was failing, when everyone around me was choosing easy, she paused. I learned that the hard choice usually feels hard because it's honest, not because it's wrong. The room was quiet. Nathan's phone buzzed on the table between them. He looked at it. His expression changed not dramatically, but specifically. The operational shift. Something was happening. What? She said. Victor Crane is asking to speak to me, Nathan said. He looked up. He's asking to speak to both of us. Isabella went still. He knows I'm here? He knew you were in the building. He apparently said. Nathan looked at the phone screen. He said, and I'm reading this directly, tell her I want to apologize. Not to him. To her, she deserves to hear it from me directly. The sentence arrived without warning. It hit her somewhere she hadn't expected it to. Not because Victor Crane's apology resolved anything. Not because it changed the night she had spent in that basement, or the device under her kitchen table, or the 3 weeks of listening. But because it was the gesture of a man who, at the end of something terrible, had looked at what he had done to a specific person who had nothing to do with his grief, and chosen to acknowledge it directly. That was not nothing. Okay, she said. Nathan looked at her. You don't have to, I know. She met his gaze. Okay. He made the call. 2 minutes later, Victor Crane was brought into the conference room. He was older than she had imagined. She had built a picture from the financial records, and Nathan's description, the 27-year-old with connections, the partner, the man who left, and the reality, was different in the way all realities are different from their reconstructions. He was 53. He had a face that had spent 8 years working against its self-intelligence and grief running in opposite directions, leaving their marks in the lines around his eyes and the set of his jaw. He looked at Nathan first. Something passed between them, wordless, compressed, the specific communication of two people who know each other's history in ways that cannot be summarized. Not reconciliation, not its opposite either, something that had not yet become whatever it was going to become. Then he looked at Isabella. I know you don't owe me anything, he said. Least of all your time this morning. But I asked because he stopped. Rebuilt the sentence. I need you to know that when I agreed to this, I told myself the people who would be affected were people who had chosen the world they were in. I told myself you were. He stopped again. I told myself things that made it easier. I was wrong. And the specific wrongness of it's something I needed to say to your face. Isabella looked at him. She thought about what she wanted from this moment. Whether she wanted to say something hard or something true or nothing at all. She gave herself the time to actually feel it, not the performed response, not the gracious acceptance, not the cold dismissal. I appreciate that you're saying it, she said finally. I also need you to know that the story you built about Nathan, about what he is and what he deserves, and what you were justified in taking from him, is not entirely accurate. Victor's eyes sharpened. What do you mean? She looked at Nathan. Nathan held her gaze for a moment. Then he gave her the smallest nod she had ever seen from him. Permission. Or perhaps something more than permission. Trust, moving in a direction it had not moved before. She looked back at Victor. The organization that took Amelia, she said. The one you held Nathan responsible for bringing into range of your family. What about them? They don't exist anymore, she said. Nathan dismantled them. Quietly. without telling you. Starting about 6 months after you left, the room went completely still. Victor Crane looked at her. Then he looked at Nathan. Nathan said nothing. He was not the kind of man who explained himself on request. He was the kind of man who had done the thing and let the doing of it be the statement. Victor's face changed, not immediately. It was a slow change, like something shifting underground, tectonic, invisible on the surface until it wasn't, until the accumulation of movement forced itself through in a way that couldn't be contained. 8 years of a specific story about a specific man and a specific wrong. And a piece of that story had just been extracted and replaced with something that changed the load-bearing structure of everything else. "Why didn't you tell me?" Victor said, very quietly. "Because I didn't do it to tell you," Nathan said. "I did it because it needed doing." Victor looked at him for a long time. Then he put his hands flat on the table in front of him and looked down and said nothing for 30 seconds. In those 30 seconds, Isabella watched a man do something extremely difficult in silence. She did not look away. She felt that watching was the right thing to do, not out of satisfaction, not out of judgment, but because some moments deserved to be witnessed. "I used a woman who had nothing to do with any of this," Victor said finally. "Not to Isabella. To Nathan. I used the same logic: if I can reach her, I can reach you, that I've spent 8 years hating someone else for using on Amelia." He stopped. "I became the thing I wanted you to answer for." Nathan said nothing. He didn't need to. Victor looked at Isabella. "I'm sorry," he said. Again, still directly. "That doesn't fix anything." "No," she agreed, "it doesn't. But you should know it's real." She looked at him. "I know," she said. Nathan stood then. The movement was quiet and deliberate. The specific movement of a man who has made a decision and is moving toward it without drama. "Victor," he said. Victor looked up. "Amelia," Nathan said. "How is she?" The question landed differently than anything else in the room. Because it was not operational, it was not strategic. It was a man asking about a 16-year-old girl who had spent 8 years growing up in the shadow of something that happened when she was 8, and genuinely wanting to know the answer. Victor's expression did something that was very hard to look at. "She's good," he said. His voice was rough at the edges. She's a good kid. She doesn't know any of this. She thinks I've been in the import business." "Keep it that way," Nathan said. "Whatever happens next, keep it that way." Victor looked at him. "What does happen next?" he said. Nathan met his gaze. "You give my team everything Claire Soto is giving them. Complete. Then we decide the rest." He paused. "But understand this. The reason there's a decision to make at all is because of a conversation I had at 6 this morning with someone who reminded me that 2 things can be true simultaneously." Victor glanced at Isabella. She said nothing. She did not need to. Nathan nodded to the men at the wall. They moved to collect Victor. At the door, Victor turned back one last time. "For what it's worth," he said, "to both of them, to neither of them, to the room in general. What you two have, whatever it is, don't waste it the way I wasted things." He looked at Nathan. "I wasted things, Nathan. With you, with my family, with everything. 8 years of waste." He paused. "Don't do that." The door closed. The conference room was quiet. Nathan and Isabella sat in it together, the length of the table between them, the morning pressing in, around the edges of everything. And the silence was different. Again, not the professional silence, not the crisis silence, but something new. Something that had not existed between them before last night and now existed completely, fully formed, impossible to unknow. "He's right," Isabella said. Nathan looked at her. "About what specifically?" he said, as if there might be multiple possibilities, and he wanted to be certain. "About waste," she said. "About not doing it." He was quiet for a moment. "Then are you going to make me say it again? You said it in a hallway at 6 in the morning," she said. "I think you can say it in a conference room at 7. Something moved across Nathan's face, the almost expression she had learned over 3 years, the one that was as close as he came to being undone by something good, and this time it did not become the almost expression and stop. This time it became something full. "I said I wasn't asking you to do anything with it," he said. "I know what you said." She held his gaze. "I'm telling you to ask." He stood. He walked around the table. He sat in the chair beside her, not across from her, not at a distance, and he looked at her with an expression she had no professional category for and had stopped pretending she needed one. "Stay," he said. "In the building with me." He said it simply, directly, without decoration. The way Nathan Moretti said everything that actually mattered to him, which was without ceremony and without the cushioning that made things easier to take back. Not as my assistant, not as a solution to a logistical problem. With me. She looked at him. She thought about 3 years of good mornings and difficult Tuesdays, and invoice flags and conference calls she had quietly rerouted around his schedule so he didn't have to sit for them. She thought about every time she had noticed something about him and carefully not thought about it too directly. She thought about 1:17 in the morning and don't hang up, and the fact that when everything had collapsed into danger and basement darkness, there had been exactly one name in her mind. "I'm going to be terrible at this," she said. "I know," he said. "So am I. I'll still tell you when you're wrong. I'm counting on it, and I'm not going to stop flagging things that don't fit." "Good," he said. "That's the thing that kept me alive last night." She looked at him, and for the first time in 3 years, Isabella Reyes stopped being careful. She reached across and put her hand over his on the table. Not dramatically, not with the weight of a movie moment. Just a hand, just contact, just the specific, ordinary, enormous gesture of one person deciding to stop maintaining a distance they no longer believed in. Nathan looked down at her hand. Then he turned his hand over and held on. Outside, Chicago was waking up. The crisis was in its final stages. Delgado was managing the debriefs. Caruso was making coffee somewhere in the building. The empire was intact, reorganized, slightly bruised but standing. And in the conference room on the 7th floor, 2 people who had spent 3 years being very careful with each other sat side by side and held on, and neither of them was careful. She slept for 4 hours. It was the deepest sleep she'd had in months, which said something about the nature of exhaustion, that the body doesn't care about the circumstances, only the deficit. She woke up in the 14th floor guest suite at noon with her shoes still on and the tablet on the pillow beside her and the particular clarity that comes after the kind of night that strips everything unnecessary away. She lay there for 60 seconds and took inventory. Marcus Hale was in custody, fully debriefed, no longer a variable. Victor Crane had given Nathan's team 6 hours of detailed testimony about every communication, every transfer, every moving piece of the 22 months he had spent building toward something that had ultimately dismantled itself in a single night. Claire Soto was gone. Delgado had confirmed her departure from Chicago at 9 that morning, with the understanding that return was not an available option. The device from her apartment had been removed and analyzed. The information it had gathered had been cataloged. The damage, Delgado had said in her precise 5-word style, was contained and fully accounted for. And Nathan Moretti had held her hand in a conference room at 7 in the morning and asked her to stay. She sat up. She looked at the tablet. She looked at her phone. There was a message from Nathan sent 40 minutes ago. "My office when you're ready." No urgency. She almost smiled at that. No urgency from Nathan Moretti was its own category of statement. The man operated on a frequency where urgency was the baseline and everything else was a controlled deviation from it. No urgency meant he was thinking about her specifically. About whether she'd slept. About giving her the space to choose the moment. She got up. She washed her face. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror with the specific directness of a woman doing an honest assessment. And what she saw was someone who had spent a night being afraid and a morning being useful and arrived at noon at a threshold she hadn't anticipated crossing. She crossed it. She knocked on Nathan's office door and opened it without waiting for an answer, because she had been doing that for 3 years, and it was not the kind of thing that changed overnight. He was on the phone. He looked up when she came in, and the thing that happened to his face was immediate and unguarded, and then controlled but slower than before. The control came slower now. As if some internal mechanism had been adjusted, the response time deliberately lengthened, the automatic shuttering of expression given less authority than it used to have. He held up one finger. She sat in the chair across from his desk, not the guest chair near the door, the one directly across from him, the one she had been sitting in for 3 years, and she waited. He finished the call in 2 minutes and set the phone down. "You slept," he said. 4 hours. Better than nothing. Considerably. She looked at him. "How long have you been up?" "I haven't been down." She had known that. She had known it the way she knew most things about him, not because he announced it, but because she had learned the particular vocabulary of his silences and his movements, and the specific quality of his stillness at different hours. "Nathan, I had things to resolve," he said. "Not defensively. Just factually. They're resolved now." "Everything?" He looked at her directly. "Victor Crane is being transferred to a facility in Michigan tonight," he said. "Not a comfortable facility, but not what the old version of this would have looked like." He paused. "Emilia will not hear her father's name in connection with any of this. I've taken steps to ensure that." Isabella absorbed this. "And the testimony he gave is sufficient to close the financial exposure Marcus created. The transfers will be recovered. The rival organization that received the diverted funds is being handled through separate channels." He paused. "Legitimate channels, where possible." She heard the qualifier. "Where possible." "You're trying," she said. "I've been trying for a while," he said. "It's slower than people expect. Legitimate things are built differently. They take longer. They require different skills." A pause. "They require different people." She looked at him. "Is that a job offer?" Something moved across his face. "That depends," he said, "on what you want it to be." She had thought about this for 4 hours of unconscious processing and the 20 minutes since she'd woken up. She had turned it over in the particular way. She turned over problems from every angle, looking for what didn't fit, looking for the hidden variable that changed the calculation. She had not found a hidden variable. What she had found was this: she had been doing the work for 3 years. The real work, not the scheduling and the paperwork, though that too, but the work of seeing clearly inside an organization that was deliberately constructed to make clear seeing difficult, and flagging what didn't fit, and making the right calls at 1:17 in the morning when everything was wrong. She had been doing it. She had simply not been doing it with the title that matched. "I want a different contract," she said. Nathan's expression sharpened. "Define different." "I want to know everything that could make me a target. Every relevant threat, every active situation, every piece of information that someone could use against me or against you through me." She held his gaze. "No more managed exposure. No more deciding what I need to know for my own protection." "Agreed," he said, without hesitation. "I want actual authority over the compliance division. Not advisory. Actual. The kind where my flag on an invoice doesn't go to a financial team that can override it without explanation." Also agreed. She looked at him carefully. He was agreeing too quickly. "You already decided this," she said. "I decided it at approximately 5 this morning," he said, "while you were working your way through Victor's transfer records, and I was watching the video feed from the lobby." He paused. "I decided it because watching you dismantle a 22-month conspiracy in 6 hours with a tablet and a cold cup of coffee made certain things very clear." "What things?" "That the structure I built around you for 3 years, useful assistant, managed access, controlled exposure, was built for my convenience. Not for your capability." He looked at her steadily. "You are more capable than the role I gave you. I built the role small because it was easier to protect something small. That was a failure of my thinking, not a reflection of your limits." She had not expected him to exactly like that. She had expected something more Nathan-controlled, precise, acknowledging the point, without fully dismantling the justification. Instead, he had gone directly to the center of it and named it without softening. She took a breath. She said, "Okay," he said. The word sat between them for a moment, with the particular weight of two people who mean something larger than the syllable. Then Nathan's phone buzzed. They both looked at it. He picked it up, read the message, and his expression changed into something she recognized instantly: the operational shift, the direction, the momentum. Something was happening. "What?" she said. "Marcus Hale's attorney filed an emergency motion this morning," he said. through a Judge Marcus has apparently had a relationship with for some time. He looked up. He's requesting immediate release, pending a full evidentiary review. The filing argues that the evidence against him was gathered through illegal access to private financial records. Isabella went still. Illegal access, she repeated. The tablet, Nathan said, the full system access Caruso provided. Marcus's attorney is arguing that you accessed confidential financial records without proper authorization during an active crisis situation, and that any evidence derived from that access is inadmissible. She looked at him. I had your explicit authorization, she said. Verbal. Confirmed by a phone call. Nathan set the phone down. His attorney is arguing there was no formal documentation of that authorization, that it was a unilateral decision made under duress. It was made under duress because Marcus Hale created the duress. Yes, Nathan said. The motion does not appear to consider that a complicating factor. She sat forward. Her mind was already moving the same way it moved through the transfer records, looking for the structure, the angles, the point where the logic of the attack had to expose something exploitable. The check-in call, she said. 6 o'clock this morning. That was recorded. I was on the monitored line. Marcus made that call with full knowledge of what he was doing. It was not a coerced confession. It was an active cooperation agreement he entered voluntarily.
Yes.
And Delgado's team has the device from my apartment. Chain of custody on that evidence is entirely separate from anything I accessed. Yes. And the original photograph I took at the gala is on my personal phone. I had every right to photograph something I discovered in the course of my duties as your representative at a professional event. Nathan was looking at her with an expression she recognized, now had always recognized. She realized, even when she hadn't allowed herself to name it. How fast can you write this up? He said. Faster than Marcus's attorney can get a hearing, she said. You have 2 hours. She was already standing. Isabella, he said. She paused. The contract we just discussed, he said. I want it formal, legal, documented. Not a verbal agreement in my office the morning after a crisis. He held her gaze. I want it right. She understood what he was saying. He was saying that the changes they had discussed, all of them, the professional ones and the ones that sat beneath the professional ones, were not morning after words. Not things said in the specific emotional atmosphere of an all-night crisis that would reorganize themselves into something smaller and more manageable once the adrenaline cleared. He was saying he meant them. He was saying he meant everything. So do I, she said. She went to work. The document she produced in 94 minutes was 18 pages long and methodical in its construction, each piece of evidence isolated, sourced, and connected to the next with the specific clarity that made ambiguity impossible. The photograph, with its full metadata intact, the recorded check-in call, with transcript, the device from her apartment and Delgado's chain of custody documentation. The formal authorization for system access, which she produced from the phone records in the specific language of Nathan's instruction to Caruso, she'll need this, spoken prior to her arrival at the lobby, demonstrating premeditated authorization rather than crisis improvisation. She gave it to Nathan's legal team at 2:17 in the afternoon. The lead attorney, a careful man named Roslin, who had worked with Nathan for 11 years, read it in 20 minutes. He looked up from the last page and said, to no one in particular, this is airtight. I know, Isabella said. Roslin looked at her with an expression she suspected contained more surprise than he intended to show. Mr. Moretti said, you'd have something useful, he said. He didn't specify the degree. He has high standards, she said. I've been meeting them for 3 years. The standards are just becoming visible. Roslin almost smiled. The motion was countered by 4 p.m. By 5:30, the emergency release request had been denied. By 6, Marcus Hale's attorney had withdrawn to reconsider his position. Isabella was in Nathan's office when the final confirmation came through. She was at the small table near the window that she had used for 3 years to spread out documents when the desk was too crowded, and she was reading through the Compliance Division's personnel files, her new authority, already quietly in motion when Nathan's phone buzzed, and he said simply, it's done. She looked up. Marcus, staying exactly where he is. Nathan put the phone down. His attorney apparently decided that the evidentiary package his opponent assembled made further legal maneuvering more expensive than instructive. Expensive for the attorney or for Marcus? Both, Nathan said. A pause. You broke their strategy in 94 minutes. The strategy was poorly constructed, she said. It assumed the access authorization was undocumented because it was verbal. It didn't account for the fact that verbal instructions to a third party, captured in phone records and confirmed by witness testimony, create a demonstrable record. Most people don't think that clearly after being awake for 36 hours. She looked down at the personnel file in front of her. Most people weren't angry enough, she said. Nathan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "There's something I haven't told you." She looked up. He was watching her with the steady, direct attention that meant something significant was coming, not a crisis, but something that required the same quality of presence. "Victor Crane asked to speak to me alone this morning," Nathan said. "Before the transfer. You didn't mention that. I'm mentioning it now." He paused. "He told me something about Marcus, about why Marcus agreed to work with him in the first place." She waited. "Marcus's son," Nathan said. "He's 23. A year ago he got involved with people Marcus had no connection to independent operators, the kind that exist at the edges of organized territories. He owed them money, a significant amount. They were not patient about collecting." Isabella's hands stilled on the personnel file. Victor approached Marcus 6 months before Nathan continued. He told Marcus he could make the debt disappear in exchange for access. "Marcus betrayed you to save his son," she said. "Yes." She sat with that. The full shape of it shifted when she did. Not the betrayal that remained what it was, with its 15 years of context and its specific damage. But the human architecture beneath it changed. A father and a son and a debt and a man who had spent 15 years inside an organization that ran on loyalty, discovering that the price of his son's life was everything else he had. She had spent 6 hours dismantling Marcus Hale's conspiracy. She had not known about the son. "Does this change anything?" she asked carefully. "It doesn't change what he did," Nathan said. "It changes how I understand why." He paused. "Those are different things. What about the son?" "The debt is gone," Nathan said. Simply, directly. The way he said everything that cost him something significant, which was without announcement. Isabella looked at him. "You paid it. I resolved it. Nathan Marcus spent 15 years in my organization. He had reasons for what he did that a person in his position might reasonably feel they had no alternative to." Nathan's voice was even. "I'm not forgiving the betrayal. I'm acknowledging that the people around him were also affected by a situation they didn't create." He paused. "The son is 23. He made a bad decision, and then his father tried to protect him from it in the worst possible way. The son doesn't carry that." She looked at him for a long moment. "You keep doing that," she said. "Doing what?" "Being more than people think you are." He held her gaze. "You're the only person who notices," he said. "That's not true," she said. "Your people notice. They follow you because they notice. They have for years. They're just not able to say it in a way you can hear." She paused. "I can say it in a way you can hear." Something shifted in his face. Something that was not the almost expression she had spent 3 years cataloging. Something complete. "Yes," he said quietly. "You can." The office was settling into the particular quiet of late afternoon, the kind that comes after a long crisis has finally released its hold on a building, the pace slowing. The tension in the air redistributing itself into something the people moving through the space could actually breathe. Isabella closed the personnel file. She had been thinking about something since noon, turning it over the way she turned everything over, looking at it from every angle until the angles resolved into a single clear direction. "I called my sister this morning," she said. Nathan looked at her. "While you were in the debrief with Rosalind," she continued. "She calls every Sunday. I didn't want to wait until Sunday." "How is she?" "Good." She asked why I was calling on a Wednesday morning. Isabella paused. "I told her I'd had a long night and wanted to hear a familiar voice." "That's true. I also told her I thought something important was happening in my life." She looked at him directly. She asked what. I said I was still figuring out the specifics, but that the general shape of it was becoming clear. Nathan was quiet. "What did she say?" he asked. "She said it was about time." Isabella held his gaze. "She said she'd been listening to me talk about my impossible employer for 3 years, and she'd gotten a picture of him that sounded considerably more complicated than a typical boss, and that complicated usually meant something. She's perceptive. Genetic," Isabella said. "It runs in the family." A pause. Then Nathan said, "I want to meet her." She looked at him. "My sister." "Yes, Nathan. We are approximately 16 hours past the moment you asked me to stop being your assistant." "I know the timeline," he said. "I also know what I want." He looked at her steadily. "I've spent a long time not saying things, because the saying of them complicated structures I had built that served a specific purpose. Those structures have been reorganized." He paused. "I want to meet the person who knows you the way a sister knows you. I want to know the parts of your life that existed before my building and my problems and my impossible schedule." She felt that land, in the full depth of what it meant. Nathan Moretti was a man who had built an empire by controlling variables, by keeping the boundaries of his world clearly defined, by maintaining the kind of strategic distance that allowed for clear thinking. He did not reach toward things outside those boundaries casually. He did not ask to be introduced to families. He was asking now. "Sunday," she said. "Sunday," he agreed. Her phone buzzed on the table. She looked at it automatically, and the number on the screen made her breath catch in a way she immediately identified and worked to control, because she was Isabella Reyes, and she did not allow things to show on her face before she'd decided what she thought about them. "What?" Nathan said. Because he had seen it. "The number," she said. "The number calling me right now. It's the same prefix as the Shell Corporation." The fourth account. She was on her feet before she finished the sentence. Nathan was around the desk in 2 steps. He looked at the screen. His jaw tightened. "Don't answer it," he said. "If I don't answer..." "Don't answer," he said again, more firmly. "It could be a test. Or a trap. Or both. Or it could be someone trying to warn us about something we haven't found yet," she said. They looked at each other. 3 seconds of charged silence. Nathan reached past her and picked up the phone and answered it on speaker. "Hello," said a voice. A woman's voice. Young. Careful. The specific careful of someone choosing words the way you choose footing on uncertain ground. "Who is this?" Nathan said, a pause. "My name is Amelia Crane," she said. "I think you know my father." The room went completely still. Isabella felt the weight of it drop through the air like something physical. 16 years old. Victor's daughter, Amelia, who had been 8 years old in a schoolyard, and who her father had spent 8 years breaking himself against the memory of, and who was apparently on the phone at 6 p.m. on a Wednesday with a number connected to the Shell Corporation her father had used to fund a conspiracy. "How did you get this number?" Nathan said. His voice was careful. Not cold. Careful. "From my father's phone," she said. "He didn't know I had it. He doesn't know I'm calling." A pause. "He thinks I don't know anything. But I've known for a year. I know what he's been doing. I know why." Her voice was steady, but not without cost. It was the voice of a 16-year-old who has been carrying adult knowledge in a space not designed for it. "I need you to tell me if he's okay." Nathan looked at Isabella. Isabella looked back at him. "He's safe," Nathan said. "He's being held, but he's not hurt." A release of breath on the other end. "Are you going to let him go?" Amelia asked. "That's being determined," Nathan said. "Honestly, not the managed information version. The actual answer." "Mr. Moretti," a pause. She said his name without hesitation, without the particular weight that most adults gave it. 16 years old, and she said it like a fact. "I know what my father did. I know he did it because of me. Because of what happened when I was 8. Another pause. "I need you to know that I've spent 8 years wishing he would let it go. Watching him not let it go. I would rather have had my father than whatever he thought he was building for me." The sentence arrived and stayed. Isabella's hand moved without her deciding to move it. She reached across and pressed it flat against Nathan's arm, and he looked at her, and she held his gaze. And in that held gaze was everything she had said to him in the conference room that morning, about two things being true simultaneously, and about the hard choice being the honest one. Amelia, Nathan said. His voice had changed. Something in it that she had never heard from him, not professionally, not operationally, not in any of the context she had known him. Something that was simply human. Your father protected you from knowing the specifics because he was trying to protect you from something. That instinct, even when it went wrong, came from the right place. I know, she said. He's always been like that, even before. Before what happened at the school.
Yes, a pause.
He was always, she stopped. He was a good dad. Before he decided that being a good dad meant fixing something that couldn't be fixed. The silence on the line had a specific texture. I'm going to arrange for you to speak to him, Nathan said. Not through a lawyer, not through any formal channel. Directly. Tonight, if possible. He paused. Would that be something you want? Yes, Amelia said immediately. I'll need a number to reach you. She gave it. One more thing, she said, before Nathan could end the call. Yes, the woman who works for you, Amelia said. Isabella Reyes. My father mentioned her. He said she was the one who, she paused. He said she was the one who told him about what you did. For us after, she paused again, finding the exact words. He said she was the reason he understood something he should have understood 8 years ago. I wanted to say thank you, if she's there. Nathan looked at Isabella. Isabella picked up the phone. I'm here, she said. Thank you, Amelia said. Simply. Directly. Isabella thought about a girl who was 8 years old in a schoolyard, and a girl who was 16 on a Wednesday evening, calling a number she'd found in her father's phone because she loved him and she was braver than he had ever managed to be. Your father loves you very much, Isabella said. He made wrong choices because of that love. But the love itself is not in question. A pause on the line. I know, Amelia said, quietly, and then after a moment I just needed someone to say it out loud. The call ended. Nathan set the phone down. They stood together in the office, and the quiet that followed was not the quiet of an absence, but the quiet of something completed, the last piece of a long night, and a longer story, finally clicking into its place. You're going to arrange for him to call her, Isabella said. Tonight, Nathan confirmed, and after that, I'm going to consider a conversation with Victor Crane that I should have had 8 years ago, instead of the one I actually had. He paused. Which was no conversation at all. She nodded. That's the right call, she said. You'd tell me if it wasn't. Immediately and without softening, she confirmed. He almost smiled. She did smile, and then, because the day had been long, and the night before it had been longer, and there was still the ordinary world to return to the coffee maker, and the bookshelf, and the plants on the windowsill that someone had moved carefully to a safe location. Because Nathan had thought of that too. Because he thought of things she said. I need to go back to my apartment. I know, he said. Not tonight. Tonight I'm staying here. She held his gaze. But tomorrow, he agreed. I'll go with you. She looked at him. To my apartment. To help you make sure everything is where it should be. A pause. And because I've been inside your professional life for 3 years, and I want to see the rest of it. The coffee maker you saved for. The books on the shelf. He paused. The plants. She stared at him. How do you know about the plants? Delgado's report mentioned them when she confirmed the apartment was clear. He paused. She noted that they had been watered recently. She seemed to find it relevant. Delgado does not seem like a woman who notices plants. Delgado notices everything, Nathan said. She just reports selectively. Isabella looked at him for a long moment. You're going to be a very complicated person to be with, she said. Yes, he said without apology. And you already know all of it. The structure, the history, the world it comes with. You've known for 3 years. I have, she said. And you're still here. I'm still here, she confirmed. He looked at her with that expression full and complete and no longer abbreviated, and she looked back at him with the specific steadiness of a woman who has stopped being careful because she no longer needs to be. Because the thing she was protecting herself from has turned out to be the thing she was moving toward all along. 6 months later, Chicago had a different Nathan Moretti. His empire was more organized. His businesses were moving toward legitimacy at a pace that surprised everyone who had believed the move was impossible. His people worked differently, not because they feared punishment, but because the standard had changed, had been made explicit, had been built into the structure of every decision from the top down. Amelia Crane visited Chicago twice. The first time was to see her father, who was serving a reduced sentence in a facility 2 hours away. Nathan had worked with the prosecution in ways that Rosalind described as unprecedented, and that Isabella described as correct. The second time was to tour 3 universities, because she was 17 and brilliant and planning a future that her father had finally decided he wanted to watch instead of manage. Victor Crane called Nathan on a Thursday in February. Not through a lawyer, not through a formal channel. He called the direct line, and Nathan answered, and they spoke for 40 minutes, and at the end of it something shifted between them that was not forgiveness and was not its opposite, something more honest than either, something that acknowledged damage and survival and the specific human difficulty of carrying both. Marcus Hale's son opened a restaurant in Wicker Park. Nathan heard about it from Caruso, who heard about it from Delgado, who did not explain how she knew. No one asked. The restaurant got good reviews. Nathan sent no message. The not sending was its own statement, deliberate and sufficient. Claire Soto was in Portland, doing compliance work for a small nonprofit, the kind of organization that did not require her to tell herself things about the people who might be affected. She did not contact Nathan or Isabella. She was not expected to. Isabella's office was no longer outside Nathan's. It was next to it. The title on the door said Chief Compliance Officer, which was accurate as far as it went, which was not entirely far enough, because the title did not capture the specific nature of what she did, which was see things clearly, flag things that didn't fit, tell Nathan when he was wrong, and stand beside him in every room that required both honesty and the particular courage to speak it. She was very good at it. She had always been very good at it. It had simply taken one night in a basement, one phone call at 1:17 in the morning, and one man running toward her through the dark, for both of them to finally admit that good work deserves the right name. On a Sunday in March, Nathan Moretti sat at a kitchen table in Isabella's apartment and had coffee with Isabella's sister Carmen, who was visiting from Phoenix and who had apparently decided in the first 4 minutes of meeting him that she liked him on the condition that he never gave Isabella a reason to regret trusting him. He had said, "That seems like a reasonable condition." Carmen had said, "It's not a condition. It's a warning." He had said, "I know the difference." Carmen had looked at Isabella and raised her eyebrows, and Isabella had looked back at her with the expression that said, "Yes, I know. I told you it was complicated." And Carmen had laughed the specific laugh of a woman who has been listening to a story build for 3 years and is finally holding the finished thing in her hands. Later, after Carmen had gone to her hotel and the apartment was quiet, Nathan stood at the window with the particular roughness Isabella had learned in 3 years to read as comfort rather than distance. This was his comfortable stillness, not his operational one, and he said, "She's right, you know." About what specifically, Isabella said. About it being a warning and not a condition. He turned to look at her. "The distinction matters. I know," she said. "That's why I like her." He moved away from the window and came to where she was and stood close in the way that still surprised her sometimes, not because it was unfamiliar, but because it remained its own category of thing. Nathan Moretti, in an ordinary kitchen on a Sunday afternoon, choosing to be exactly where she was. "I want to ask you something," he said. "You can ask," she said. An echo of a conversation from months ago, in the back of a car in the dark. "That night," he said, "when you called me, you said, 'Don't hang up.' And I've been thinking about it since, about why those 3 words." He paused. "Most people in trouble would say, 'Help me,' or 'Come here,' or 'Tell me what to do.' But you said, 'Don't hang up.'" She looked at him. She had thought about this too. "Because 'help me' assumed I knew what kind of help I needed," she said. "And 'come here' assumed I knew where I was going. And 'tell me what to do,'" she paused. "That was never going to be what I said." "No," he agreed. "Don't hang up was what I actually needed," she said. "I needed to know you were there, on the line, that I wasn't alone with whatever was happening." She held his gaze. I knew if you were there, I could figure out the rest. Nathan was quiet. You could have figured out the rest without me, he said. Maybe, she said, but I didn't want to. He looked at her with everything he had ever chronicled and was no longer controlling. With the full weight of a man who had built a life around never needing anyone and had discovered that needing was not weakness, that the woman standing in front of him had known that all along and had been patient enough to let him find it himself. Good, he said. Quiet. Direct. Final. The word landed the way all honest things landed between them now, without cushioning, without grace, with the full weight of what it actually meant. Nathan Moretti had spent his life making people afraid. It had taken one woman, one phone call, and 3 words in a dark basement to teach him what was more powerful than fear. She had not saved him in any dramatic sense. She had simply refused to see him the way everyone else did and kept refusing through 3 years of impossible Tuesdays and difficult schedules and the careful maintenance of a distance that had never fully held. And he had run toward her through the dark, and that was enough, that was everything, at all.